I'll open the floor then in terms of a general discussion, but initially perhaps you might like to focus on the last two papers. Any questions on those? Niels? Yeah.
Yeah, just technical. You said that pit tags will stay in fish for life.
Yeah.
You said it twice. So how do you know that?
Well,
I wish it was so, but...
It's a good question. I mean, we obviously they go in the body cavity, and I suspect that we do know from recapture what we do when we tag our fish. We also cut the adipose fin, which is sort of an international signal that the fish is tagged in some manner, and I mean the tag loss within the freshwater environment, I mean, is, I don't know, 0.1%, not even that, like of the fish we see. Later on in the States, particularly the females may be vulnerable to losing their tags during spawning events.
Exactly, that's what I want to point out. They lose them big time.
Yeah.
You got like 40% loss from repeat spawners.
Repeat spawners, yeah.
So I just want to say that when you monitor the kelp going down, so you might consider to put another tag in.
Yeah.
For big fish, put it in the back, in the musculature, then it stays forever.
Okay.
But after one spawning event, we found that most of the females actually just spawn out.
That might explain why we never see any repeat spawners on the Froon on the pip tags. Now we know they're there from looking at scales, but we just don't see them with the pit tags.
Any other questions? Yes.
A question for Joel. Is there any evidence of the adverse impact of the Is there any evidence of the adverse impact of the very unnatural sudden spates in the Truerin on survival of post-emergent fry? Because the timing seems to be difficult, and I know from work that we've been doing on the Foy catchment that unnaturally high regulation flows at emergence time is inimical to fry survival.
There's nothing that we've been doing yet on it, but I totally agree it's a fairly key thing to have a look at. It's fairly steady temperature on the Truerin, so it would be quite an easy thing to look into. Should be.
Okay, any further comments? Any comments then in general in terms of the afternoon or indeed the morning presentations? Yeah, well, Pat, yes?
Yeah, it's another question
Peter, yeah.
for Joel about the sluices there. So a two-part question. So first of all, you mentioned that some of your smolts have disappeared presumably to predation. So have you any idea what might be eating them? And linked to that, the idea of the altering the... so yeah, first question was what's eating your smolts? Do you know? And sort of linked to that, I love the idea of just changing the operating regime for your sluices. You know, it's a low cost thing to try, very straightforward. But do you think by doing that, if you perhaps narrow, so at the moment if you have say 4 sluices open plus the central fish passage route, there are 5 potential routes for your fish to go through. If you narrow that, are you then increasing the likelihood of predation? Will predators sort of home in and think, right, that's the way? And again, you can see sort of alter the operating regime almost on a daily basis and say, have it, you know, the left sluice on day 1, right sluice on day 2, and that might throw your predators. But.
Well, to start with on the predation side, the numbers of tags, well, the numbers of fish that we're not getting detected, we're presuming they'll have a better idea, but you know, tag failure is minimal. Losses of tag fish again is very, very low. You know, tag rejection. So the presumption is that the fish has died from whether it's us handling them, part of the procedure, or which again is low from things that have been done. Likelihood is predation. There is, whenever we go down there, we know if we're going to have a busy night because we'll see a lot of gooseanders when we arrive. It's uncanny, and there is an awful lot of birds that we see on the river, scubrous birds we see on the river. So my presumption would be that a lot of it is avian predation. I don't think, I mean, there are pike within the area, and there's large brown trout and stuff within the area, but from what we've seen, the tracks that we got within the VPS, there didn't appear to be tracks of anything other than a smolt because we picked them up downstream at places downstream. So first question, probably piscivorous birds. And what was your second question?
Do you think by
Reducing
the thing, could you increase predation?
We could do. I mean, the part of the risk is by having very narrow gaps. So the head differential between the sluices can be quite high, and if we have very narrow gaps, you could have very high velocity through that. So which would have its own issues. So the thought is, if we can open up individual sluices, especially one thought is to open up sluice gates 3 and 4, which the thalweg naturally hits 1 and 2. So if we opened up 3 and 4, it may draw fish across the front of the sluices and hopefully find the fish pass and drop through that preferentially to then carry on to 3 and 4. So there's various theories that we're looking at in terms of how we can operate it. We've got, like I say, we're going to be carrying out the work again this year, so we'll be busy starting in a month or so. And then the likelihood is that we'll be putting in more work, going to be carrying it on for a couple of years after at least to carry on looking at any mitigation that we do put in, making sure it works. Does that answer it?
Yeah. That's good. And sort of add with if birds are one of the biggest problems.
Yeah.
Have you thought about the option of installing a bird scan, which is farmers would use?
Yeah. We've talked about that for this year. Yeah. Getting stuff in. We've done that in a few other places and they've worked pretty well.
Great, because it's relatively low cost, isn't it?
Yeah,
So,
nice and easy thing to do. So yeah.
Excellent.
Thank you both very much. Yes. Ted, just pass the mic across.
Thank you. There's been a lot of talk about the, whatever you want to call it, the window of opportunity for smolt emigration. And potentially it's a very important factor in some of these developments where if there are delays. It's very relevant to a bit of work I've been advising on recently, and I've been struggling to find anything more than theoretical arguments about it. I haven't found anything quantified. So a bit of a sort of challenge to anybody here. Does anybody know of actual quantified estimates? What is a serious delay? When does the delay become a problem? There are classic papers, McCormack et al. And people like that. Everybody talks about it. We all believe it. But what is an acceptable level? I noticed that somebody, I can't remember which paper it was you. Yeah, you put in 4 days. Was that just off the top of your head? So I said, general question, has anybody got real figures that they think will move us forward in this area?
Any answers to that? Anyone got real figures? Yes?
I think
also, that one, we just get the mic back. Thanks. That was very comprehensive answer. Not putting him on the spot,
Thanks, Ken. Also, to add to that all these delays that we're seeing, we're comparing it to a unnatural impoundment of some sort, that we don't actually know good evidence what happens in a natural system, and that a delay at a waterfall or a riffle might also be 3, 4, 5 days. Hopefully we'll have some work out in the next month or so supporting that. That just because we see a delay at a barrier doesn't mean that that's a natural or an unnatural phenomenon that's happening.
Thank you. Has anyone got a direct answer in terms of the actual artificial barriers? Anyone anything to add in terms of?
Well, I'd say one thing I've considered with ours with the D is the cumulative impact. I don't think it's very easy to put, like you say, to put a figure on it. But somewhere like the D, we've got quite a number of different barriers as we're going downstream. So I think they'd all be very unique, and it'd be quite difficult to work out how that would. Like I say, in terms of what we would expect normally, we're planning this year to put more arrays in downstream. We had some this year to look at travel time, transit speed through unmodified sections, and see how they compare.
Okay, I'll go back to Ted. Now, one point that I do remember, Phil, correct me, or Elvira if I'm wrong, but I think in the context of lakes, certainly it can be quite different to rivers, and it causes endless confusion if you have very low lake systems. They really find it very difficult to find that lip in terms of trying to get out, even in natural lakes as such. I'll pass this back to Ted.
I can shout.
Okay, shout.
Just to say that I know in the US, in their authorization on
very restricted controls where they're downstream migrating. The operators of them must demonstrate they don't delay smolt movement. I think something like 95% of the smolts must get down within a day or something. So they're being very restricted. But again, as far as I'm aware, they don't actually have any hard data. It's just people saying, what can we get away with, or what can we put into the regulation? And it's becoming increasingly important to have some of these values. So if anybody's got them, please send them.
Sorry, I'll just go to Andy first and then back to Niels, yeah?
Well, I think Ted alluded
Andy, do you want to
to
take this one?
I think Ted mentioned it in his question. There is some evidence from North America that a figure of something like 400 degree days during the smolt run is the figure that they give in terms of desmolting a fish to the extent that it probably wouldn't survive in salt water. So they've done limited work, but I mean, nothing's been done on this side of the Atlantic in relation to that type of study.
And that was the basis on which that 4-day period occurred in the paper that Joel's just referred to, which is published in Journal of Ecohydrology.